Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Blue Screen Brothers. My name is Alex, and together with me we have my brother Olav and Marius. Hello.
Hello.
Bonjour.
So we had some feedback on the app registrations, right, Olav?
Yeah, we did one. It was a quite long episode, but it was a good episode, and I got the question right afterwards related to the difference between app registration and enterprise registration, and the process of maintaining and cleaning up, because he wanted to delete. He found 4 enterprise apps that he didn't need anymore. He knew that this was deleted from the system behind, so he wanted to delete the 4 enterprise apps, but that's not always a good idea, Marius.
Well, so deleting the enterprise app in itself still leaves you with an app registration, at least. So it depends a bit on what you're trying to achieve, essentially. So yeah, as we talked about in the last episode, an enterprise application is essentially an instance of your app registration.
Or somebody else's app registrations.
Or somebody else's enterprise app registration, correct. And that means that you can essentially delete this enterprise app or service principal that is linked to or based on this app registration, and then you can even create a new one based on the same app registration. And what you need to ensure, at least for your not for sort of your own tenant's safety, but more of the, well, we have 900 app registrations in our tenant. What on earth are all of those? So to avoid that, you also need to make sure that you clean up the app registrations. What I usually recommend is actually maintaining app registrations using infrastructure as code mechanisms such as Terraform, because first of all, you can then manage these using Azure DevOps pipelines and all the mechanisms related to that. You don't need permissions, meaning that you have like a single service principal that does things for you, like the Terraform service principal, rather than delegating to each and every IT person and things like that. You can have approvals and planning stages and more like life cycle. So meaning that you can say that things like the keys, we're going to talk about the keys here, but or secrets. So they should have an expiry date, and having methods to actually control things like that is crucial. So yeah, that will be a whole different video, I think, if we're going to dive into that whole Terraform part. We can do that eventually, I think, but I would strongly recommend going in that direction when you manage a tenant, especially at quite large scale.
Yeah, but if we are stuck with some old old stuff like already existing app registration, is there any easy way to me to see if there are an enterprise connected to it, or do you just have to search?
Yeah, so exactly. So for example, we have these two, Olav 1 and Olav 2, that we created in the last video. So we have this managed application in something that it doesn't complete. So this is the enterprise app, right? So you can see it here in the GUI. But you could also do things like using PowerShell with this get.mg application example that we had last time, where you have this get.mg application and get.mg service principal, and essentially just comparing those, because that's what this does. It essentially just checks whether there's an app or an enterprise app with this application ID active in your tenant. And if we were to go to Olav 2 over here and on properties, click delete like this, and hit refresh. Yeah, Azure AD is always fun. Let's give it a few seconds, and this will essentially or eventually disappear, meaning that we will then see that this no longer contains. There you go. So here it now says create service principal. So it's starting to use a different word about the same thing.
Yeah.
So when we click create service principal here, we will then create the enterprise app again. This bug has been in Azure AD forever. Wonder when they will fix it, but now we can see that the enterprise application is operational again. I didn't note it down, but now this enterprise app will actually have a different object ID.
Okay,
yeah.
but it could be empty, so it looked like we doesn't have any managed applications, but other instances can have managed applications.
Yeah, other tenants or other Azure AD tenants. So if this is set to multiple organizations, then you cannot actually know whether anyone are using it, which is annoying. But it essentially means that you need to, whenever you create these multiple organizations app registrations, I would recommend really tying the life cycle of the app registration to the life cycle of the product or service that you are providing. So meaning that let's say you provide some kind of portal, a web portal of some sort, and this app registration is used to power sign in into that the portal, then tying the life cycle of the app registration to the life cycle of your portal essentially. So when you decommission that portal, making sure that you also, that's when you decommission this app registration is crucial, because you will not be able to know how many organizations might have an instance of this app registration in their tenant. But of course, if you delete it, if you know that the service is no longer active and you check these web URLs, for example, then we don't have an active site here anymore, so that might be it's no longer used, and there's no client IDs or client certificates or secrets or anything. Then there should be no way of actually authenticating using this app registration. So that means it's safe to just kill it.
Yeah.
But let's say you don't have this Olav 2 entry here, so there is no service principal. It is a multiple organizations one, and there is an active secret. Like, have I activated PIM in this tenant? Yeah, you cannot really know whether that secret is used anywhere.
Yeah, for that was something we talked about in the first episode, that it's no way of monitoring it because it doesn't hit you in any way directly to the applications. So
correct. It doesn't authenticate in your tenant, right? So
yeah,
it authenticates somewhere else.
So if you know the application, if you know the web portal, for instance, then you can monitor the web portal to see if there is traffic there. But yeah, it's no good way of doing it.
No, but usually, unless you're a service provider, having these multi-tenanted apps is not really that common. So you should be able to simply, ignore that fact for most non-service provider situations.
Yeah.
Yes. So we started talking a bit about these secrets and things. and we generated a
just
secret
one
last time. Go
one
ahead.
quick thing. If you just so people know the difference, because when you deleted the enterprise app, you just deleted the enterprise app. But if you are doing the same thing, for instance, on ULA 1, it's okay to delete ULA 1, isn't it? So if you go back and just delete ULA 1, and just to show the people the difference about deleting enterprise app and an app registration.
Sure.
Because if you go in there and press delete, you will see a lot more information and a lot more things being deleted.
Exactly. So earlier when we deleted the enterprise app for Olav 2, then, well, it didn't say anything almost. It just, well, delete, fine, go ahead. And then it was gone. While here it actually says quite a few things. And you can even, you will also now have the option of restoring the application under this deleted applications. So you can actually go here and
valid. Will it stay there forever?
No, I believe it's 30 days. Yes, 30 days. So then you cannot restore it.
So just so you know that it's a better cleanup doing it from the app registration and enterprise app and then the app registration. So it's better to start at the app registration side and deleting it.
Yeah, then you get sort of a deletion of everything, right? Not just the enterprise app and the app registration remaining. So do it from the app registrations page.
Perfect.
And the thing about when you restore it, then you will get the same application ID, right? So this is used to identify the application when you authenticate it or authenticate using it. So let's say you delete this permanently and you want to create Olav 1 again. You can create it with the same display name and the same URLs and everything, but both the object ID and the application ID will be new, and they are not possible to set. So they are like Azure AD side generated.
Yeah. So the enterprise apps at your partners will not work against the new created because of the application ID is wrong.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes. So going to these secrets then.
Yeah.
So we talked a bit about them earlier. We mentioned there's 3 different options. I would strongly recommend using certificates. So now I'm talking from I am integrating some kind of third-party application into my environment stance. So when integrating an application, always check whether they support certificates first, because it's way more secure. Client secrets is, well, they're simply easier to mess up and just unintentionally leak, right? So let's say I
left
have
in the
6
code
months,
or something,
or in a YouTube recording.
Like this. Yeah.
So I can do like this, and if I just show everything, then here's my code, and it's very, very visible. While a certificate, you need to actually upload a file, and it's much longer. I don't know if I have some. Yeah, I have some stuff here. I'm not going to upload this DigiCert one, or I can do it, but it doesn't really make sense because I don't have the private key for this one. But certificates are more sort of difficult to use, if you can call it that. But that's also what makes them a bit more secure. And of course, when authenticating using the client secret, you send the secret, right? So Azure AD and you must know the same secret. While using certificates, this is public and private key. So Azure AD knows the public key, while you have the private key potentially stored in Azure Key Vault or some kind of secure storage. So you can actually prove that you are the only one having this private key, sort of. And that it's not possible to guess it, meaning that every time you authenticate using certificates, you don't sign the same thing. You create a tiny kind of JOT string. I'm going to get to JOT soon, but and you sign it, and it contains like a valid from to date and everything. So you will never present the same sort of information to prove that you are you, while a secret
it's
will
a
be the same thing.
Token,
the secret will be the same thing all the time. Federated credentials, right now, this is essentially GitHub Actions that this is usually used for. But it's, I guess this will also be used for Azure DevOps eventually, but they also use managed service identities. And I don't think we really mentioned managed service identities earlier. I can show that actually in another tenant because I don't have a subscription in this tenant. Let's skip to this one where I
just
have
a reminder
something
to people out there that when you're creating the client secrets, you have only the creation moment to know the secret, and it will not be able to get it showing it again.
Correct. That is perfectly correct, and you will never be. Yeah, well, you're good if you guess it, right? So
yeah.
So we have another application type here when going to this enterprise applications view called managed identities. And do you know what a managed identity is, Alexander?
What do we use them for? Yeah. So what do we use them for?
Essentially, with a managed identity, we say that we trust Microsoft to fix our app registration for us and provide the required information just like seamlessly to our Azure services. So when I have a subscription in Azure, I can create a service in here. So let's do something simple. Let's create ourselves a YouTube resource group in West Europe or something. And create. And then we can create a logic app because that's one of the services that supports managed service identities. The Azure portal is super fast today. That always happens when you're recording, right?
Yeah.
So when you create a service, many of them will have this identity configuration page, essentially. Let's just call it something random. And you can create two types of managed service identities, either service or user assigned. So service assigned is essentially that Microsoft will simply do everything for you and handle the identity, while it also exists a user assigned identity resource in Azure, which is just that you can use the same identity across several applications while still having Microsoft managing all the keys for you. So when I now have this logic app and I go to identity, you will see this system assigned and user assigned. So let's just turn it on, save. Yes, I want to enable that like this. So right now I have this object ID here, which is the object ID of my service principal or enterprise app. And this is now created in Azure, but I cannot access the secret or certificate or anything related to this service principal. Microsoft
So we don't
fixes
have
that
to
for me.
update. We don't have to update the secret or change the certificate or anything like that. It will just
Correct.
be maintained by Microsoft. Yeah.
Correct. So Microsoft does everything. So if we now hit refresh on our enterprise applications page and find managed identities again, we should now hopefully see this one, this logical name that we created.
Yeah, it's easy to find among
Yes.
the all other logical names here.
And you will see this has the same ID, this object ID.
Yeah.
And there's not too much to see here actually. So you will simply see that this is linked to an Azure resource ID. So
Yeah.
this is my resource, and I can click and go to that. And if I delete this this logic app, then this identity will always also be deleted, which is very useful. And the different services use it differently, meaning that a virtual machine can also have a managed identity, but they will simply work, or you will use it differently when it comes to how you get tokens and things. So right now, this doesn't have access to anything, but I can grant it different permissions. For example, Logic App, I'm not going to build the whole thing, but this essentially lets you query, for example, the Microsoft Graph. So if I want to now get users from my tenant, graph.microsoft.com v1 users, and I add authentication. I say managed identity, system assigned, and I believe the audience is simply graph.microsoft.com, like this. Hit save. And if I now first try to run it, because I could have done this as a developer without any access to Azure AD. And what does that really mean? Well, it means this will fail. Forbidden. And that's because this service principal doesn't have access. No one has granted it
haven't
access.
given it any permissions yet, so it's
Exactly.
just created, but it's not allowed to do anything yet.
Exactly. And what is annoying is that they haven't really added any good way of really giving it those permissions in the GUI. So you can review the permissions from here, but you cannot really grant it directly from the GUI. I'm sure they will do that eventually, but you need to use PowerShell in order to actually do that, which is annoying. But it's the way it is. So I'm not going to show everything, but simply by providing these, well, how long did it take me to get that token and just query users? 10 seconds or something, and this handles everything, right? So if I get the access granted, then this will simply run and everything will be fine.
Yeah, so it's not your limitation. It's because you have already built a system that can get the information without delegating too much.
Yeah, exactly. I do think I have it on GitHub, actually, a full example using the whole shebang if we really want to. I think I have it in this write back script thing that I have in this setup down here. We have some code, new Azure AD, all kinds of things. So we can actually do it quickly if we want to. Let's take the correct window here.
We want to do it correctly.
Yeah.
Request a cloud
and this
shell.
time I was unmuted as well.
Yeah, that helps. You're not that loud that I can hear you from Bergen.
Usually you can.
Yeah. Oh, come on. Is it me or is the Azure portal a bit slow today? This is where we should have like a fast forward button. Skip 10 seconds. Well, oh, come on. Okay, so it seems to be spinning up now. We're gonna do connect Azure AD. Building your Azure drive. There we go. Connect Azure AD. We are going to do this magic here, where we essentially just we say this object ID, paste as plain text. We're going to take the identity of this object ID here, like this. As you can see, they should have a GUI to do this, but yeah, I cannot do magic. Well, almost, but there we go. So this is how we grant it, and if we wait a few seconds now, we should see that this has now suddenly been consented.
Yeah.
And this is where I think I mentioned it earlier, but this is actually an app role assignment, this admin consent thing to the Microsoft Graph. But now I have granted it user read all. So if I run the same thing in on the Logic app now, run trigger, run, and it succeeds. So now we will actually see that this step here was successfully run, and I get a lot of results.
Yes, I get the information in there. Yeah.
So I think that's pretty cool, and shows that I can now actually do things with Azure AD or other Azure services without handling a single certificate, a single secret, nothing. Microsoft handles everything for me.
And this is super useful for where you could normally you would have to use a service account.
Exactly, and so the problem is that going like back before you had this feature, you would have an infinite chicken and egg problem, because how do you handle secrets? So for example, in order to access a key vault containing your secret, you need a secret. Right? So this
but you didn't
cover
the difference between the system and the user.
No, correct.
Setup. Yeah.
So I've actually never done this in the GUI before, but let's try to see if it works. So in Azure, you can also create something called a user assigned identity. User assigned managed identity is what they call it here. So it is, you achieve the same thing. It's just that now I get a different, I always get these good names on things.
Yeah.
Now, now you will get still a service principal in your Azure AD, but you can assign this resource to multiple different Azure resources. So let's say you have 7 websites and an Azure function and a Logic app, and for some reason you want all of them to use the same identity, then you can use this managed identity or user assigned managed identity instead. So you create a single user assigned managed identity, and then rather than on your Logic app, let's go to our YouTube resource group. So here, rather than having this, so let's turn that off. Yes. And we can instead assign this one like this. And you can actually assign multiple if you want to. So it gives you a bit more flexibility when it comes to handling identities, especially when you want to have multiple resources that share the same permissions and things like that. So it simplifies some things, it complicates a few others. So
yeah, because the system assigned will always be related to the system you have created it in.
Yes,
so it will
yes.
always be related to this logic app doing something here and something there, and where
Correct.
it can get permissions. Yeah, but
Yeah.
the user assigned could be more a loose object that can get permissions in more systems. Yeah,
correct. But you can see on this one that which resources are actually associated to that managed identity. So you can see here that, oh, this is using this identity. So then you know that if this is empty, then you can delete this managed identity. So yeah, it's not all that difficult, but it has different use cases essentially.
perfect. Yeah. I think we maybe should cut it there and leave Alexander's question to the next episode.
Yes, we can do
Why
that.
is my
So-
question less important than yours, Olav?
Of course.
All right.
No, it's just to keep the episode not too long, but we will give you soon a new episode covering Alexander's big problems. So
Personal
until next
problems.
time. Until next time.
Until next time, guys.
Cheerio.